For 1,000 years, the superweapon known as Seraphim's Lament was the galaxy's greatest monument. Not to a victory, but to a failure. The best engineers from 100 worlds had tried to wake its legendary power, and every single one of them failed. Its core was cold, its circuits were dead, and its purpose was just a sad story about a long-dead species. The Intergalactic Engineering Council was crystal clear. The weapon was, thankfully, permanently useless. It was a relic, a tourist trap, a beautiful tombstone for a forgotten age of war. That is, until a human contractor named Dave was hired to polish it. Before Dave showed up with his toolbox, Seraphim's Lament was the galaxy's most famous puzzle. Picture a structure the size of a small moon, built from an impossible, shimmering metal that glowed with colors that didn't even have names. It floated silently above the dead world of its creators, the long-gone Ethel. Strange carvings, like frozen lightning, spiraled across its body, alien writing that no one had managed to translate for 10 centuries. It was beautiful, but in a sad, quiet way. The beauty of a perfectly preserved corpse. For a millennium, the smartest minds in the Galactic Council threw themselves at the Lament. The Cthar, who are beings of pure energy, tried to connect directly with its core, but were met with a complete and total lack of anything to connect to. The Saloxi, whose six-dimensional minds can literally see time, tried to reverse engineer it by looking at its past. They found nothing but a perfect, unbroken recording of it just sitting there, doing nothing. Engineers ran simulations, physicists wrote papers, and historians argued about what it was even for. A planet killer? A star eater? Or something much weirder? The Ethel hadn't left a manual, no instructions, not even a warning note, just this silent, stubborn piece of junk. The Intergalactic Engineering Council, after centuries of getting nowhere, finally published a 1,000-page report. Their conclusion was simple: the Ethel screwed up. They had tried to build a doomsday weapon so complex that they themselves could never figure out how to turn it on. The fact that their entire civilization was wiped out by a random asteroid and not their own superweapon was considered the galaxy's biggest bullet dodged. And so, Seraphim's Lament became a lesson. A story you told young engineers about the dangers of ego. It was a protected heritage site, a place for poets to visit and think about the big screw-ups of the past. It was fenced off, not to keep it from getting out, but to protect its shiny surface from space dust and graffiti. It was deemed absolutely, fundamentally, and blessedly inert. The galaxy was safe. They had nothing to worry about, because 1,000 years of the galaxy's most brilliant minds had proven it. And then came the humans. As a species, they were a recent and, let's be honest, loud addition to the galactic community. They were seen as adaptable, creative, and dangerously impulsive. While other species treated technology like a sacred art, humans tended to treat their most advanced machines like a stubborn toaster. Their culture had bizarre folk remedies like, "Did you try turning it off and on again?" and a truly savage ritual called percussive maintenance. Now, some individual humans were brilliant, but as a species, they were considered chaotic. They didn't really care about established rules. They saw a warning label not as a law, but as a friendly suggestion that you should probably ignore at least once, just to see what happens. This made them great innovators and terrifyingly unpredictable neighbors. Dave was a perfect example of this human habit. He wasn't a fancy scientist or a xenoarchaeologist. He was a contractor for Orbital Polish and Shine, a company that won the job because they were cheap. See, for all its cosmic importance, Seraphim's Lament had gotten pretty dusty over 1,000 years, and the council decided it was time for a spring cleaning. Dave's job was easy: take a low-power buffer and make the big, shiny thing shinier. He was given one very clear instruction: do not try to mess with any of the main systems. They showed him the diagrams of all the failed attempts. They told him, flat out, that this was a relic, not a machine. Dave just nodded, signed the waivers, and said, "You got it, boss. Just here for the polish." For 2 days, Dave did his job. He floated around in his suit, listening to old Earth music and polishing acre after acre of silent metal. His supervisor was a holographic Cthar named Xyler, a being with a massive intellect and almost zero patience. Xyler watched from a safe distance, its shimmering body occasionally twitching with annoyance at the human's off-key whistling. To Xyler, this was a sacred place. To Dave, it was Tuesday and the pay was good. On the third day, Dave got bored. He was polishing a spot near the base of one of the lament's huge fins. The weird writing was bigger here, and it had a faint, leftover glow. One symbol really caught his eye. It was a circle with a line through the middle, and it looked almost exactly like the power button symbol from back home. For 1,000 years, experts had argued it was a religious icon. Dave looked at the symbol, then at the complex diagnostic tools left behind by a failed mission a century ago. He looked at all the data, the smart theories, the serious warnings. He floated over to one of the old diagnostic ports, a weird, multi-pronged plug that nobody had ever gotten to work. Right next to it was a small, recessed panel that was almost totally hidden by grime. It wasn't fancy, it wasn't glowing. It was just normal. "Hey Xyler," Dave said over the comm. "Quick question. All these smart guys, they tried everything, right? Quantum tunneling, bending time, pouring raw energy straight into the thing." Xyler's hologram flickered. "Of course, human. Every method you can imagine was tried. The lament is inert. Please go back to polishing." Yeah, I get it," Dave said, wiping the dirt off the little panel. Underneath wasn't some complex interface. It was a switch. A simple, physical switch, currently in the off position. It was probably just a circuit breaker the builders had used and forgotten about. It was so simple, so primitive, that every genius engineer for a millennium had completely ignored it. They were all trying to solve a quantum puzzle while completely missing that the machine was just unplugged. But, Dave muttered to himself, did anyone just, He reached out his glove. "Human, what are you doing?" Xyler's voice screeched with alarm. "That panel isn't in the schematics. Stop what you are doing immediately. You are breaking 16 council laws." Dave ignored him. He was driven by an impulse that was uniquely human, a force more powerful than any galactic law: curiosity. He looked at the switch. Then he did something that no Kthar, Salaxi, or any other logical being would have ever dreamed of doing. He flipped it. For a second, nothing happened. "You see, human?" "Nothing," Xyler said, relief in its voice. "Now, as I was saying, you are facing serious fines and—" Then Dave did the second thing that only a human would do. Seeing that the switch did nothing, he used the other sacred principle of human engineering. He hit it, not hard, just a good, solid whack with the handle of his plasma buffer. Percussive maintenance. A deep, resonant clunk echoed through the metal, a sound that hadn't been heard in 1,000 years. The effect wasn't instant, but it was total. A low hum, like a breath held for centuries finally being let out, vibrated up through Dave's boots. The faint light in the alien writing all over the weapon didn't just get brighter. It pulsed with a slow, steady heartbeat of pure white light. "What have you done?" Xyler shrieked, its hologram dissolving into static before reforming a dozen yards away. The great monument, the tombstone of a dead civilization, was waking up. Deep inside, systems that had been cold for an eon flickered to life. The patterns on the hull started moving, flowing like liquid mercury into new shapes. Panels slid open, revealing emitters and lenses that glittered with an inner fire. The quiet, mournful beauty was gone, replaced by something terrifyingly alive. The Intergalactic Engineering Council had been wrong. So very, very wrong. They assumed the lament was a weapon that had failed to turn on. They never considered the other option. The lament wasn't broken. It was sealed. The Ethel hadn't failed to build a power source for their weapon. The lament was the power source. And the reason it hadn't worked for 1,000 years was because it had the most effective security system in the universe. A simple, physical lock. A deadbolt on a god gun. A lock so primitive, so insultingly low-tech, that every supergenius species in the galaxy had completely overlooked it. They were trying to pick a quantum lock with their minds, while Dave had just found the latch on the screen door. The switch he'd flipped? That was the override for a biological lock. And the smack from his buffer? It had shaken a 1,000-year-old tumbler into place, completing a circuit that was just waiting for one last, physical nudge. A pillar of pure white energy, 100 miles long, erupted from the top of the lament. It didn't explode, it just appeared. A solid beam of light that made the nearby star look pale. It wasn't a weapon. It was a power conduit. The energy wasn't for destroying things, it was for creating them. The lament was drawing power from a place the council didn't even know existed, a pocket dimension, a tear in reality, something ancient and raw. The Council hadn't just failed to turn on a weapon. They had failed to recognize a containment cell. The Ethel hadn't built a weapon to win a war. They had built a seal to protect the entire universe from a power source so huge it could rewrite reality itself. And Dave, the contractor from Orbital Polish and Shine, had just turned the key. The entire star system went quiet. On the bridge of the Council observation ship, alien admirals and scientists who had spent their whole lives studying the lament just stared, their various jaws and tentacles hanging slack with shock. Their sensors, which had been quietly monitoring the inert relic for decades, were now screaming with alerts, overloaded by energy readings that their computers just classified as infinite. Xyler, the Cthar administrator, had gone completely solid, frozen with a type of terror so deep it went beyond species. It just floated in space, watching the pillar of impossible light, replaying what just happened in its mind. The human hadn't used some advanced theory. He hadn't decoded an alien language. He had flipped a switch and hit the machine with a tool. The sheer, idiotic simplicity of it was more terrifying than the power itself. It was like the universe's most complex safe had been opened not by a master thief, but by a toddler who just happened to jiggle the handle the right way. The smartest minds in the galaxy had treated the lament with respect, with caution, with all the weight of their scientific rules. They saw it as a problem to be solved with what they already knew. The human, who didn't care about any of that, had approached it like a broken lawnmower. He didn't see a sacred relic. He saw a machine that wasn't working, and his first instinct was to find the dumbest, most obvious reason why. And he was right. The realization hit the Council like a cold wave of horror. They had spent 10 centuries feeling safe from a failed weapon, when really, they had been living next to a sealed gate to an ocean of unimaginable power. The Ethel weren't clumsy. They were terrified. The lament wasn't a monument to their failure. It was a monument to their sacrifice. They had locked this power away, probably costing them their own civilization, all to protect everyone else. And a human, with the cosmic equivalent of kicking a vending machine to get his snack, had just undone it all. After that, the galaxy was never the same. Seraphim's lament, now pulsing with a steady, terrifying energy, was no longer a tourist spot. It was the single most dangerous object in the known universe. It didn't give off anger or evil. It gave off pure, unfiltered potential, the power to create or unmake stars with a thought. And nobody knew how to turn it off. The Intergalactic Council held an emergency meeting. No one was angry at Dave. No one called for him to be punished. There was only a new, deep, and profound fear of humanity. Not because they were evil, but because you never knew what they were going to do next. They didn't play by the rules. Their weird, wing-it style of problem-solving could work where centuries of careful logic had failed. They were chaos in a spacesuit, a species that could stumble into secrets the universe itself had tried to bury. And so, the human interaction with ancient technology's prohibition, or as everyone calls it, the Dave Protocol, was passed into galactic law. It was a total ban, effective immediately. From that day on, humans were forbidden from repairing, touching, or even doing basic cleaning on any piece of old, non-working alien tech. The ban wasn't a punishment, it was a quarantine. The galaxy had learned its lesson. You can trust the greatest minds to study and theorize and carefully circle a problem for 1,000 years. But you can never, ever, let a human get close enough to ask that simple, terrifying question. Has anyone tried hitting it? Because the one time they did, they accidentally switched on a god. If you enjoy stories about humanity's unpredictable genius, be sure to subscribe for more tales from the stars.